Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to my Dillinger Escape Plan Discography review. These guys are one of my favorite bands of all time. If you caught my favorite bands of all time video, you'd probably know that. But I love their combination of intensity scene in the metalcore genre with the technicality and batshit zaniness you would see in the math scene. And I love the charisma within these guys, and I love the way their guitars crunch. I love their vocals across the board, no matter who's fronting them. I love the frenzied drumming that takes place on their projects, and I like how especially later on in their career, they melded that beautifully with catchy hooks and some incredible melodies at their core. These guys are incredible. They were known as one of the best live bands you can catch in the scene, at least from what I've heard. I've heard nothing but great things about their live show, and it's a shame that they're not around anymore. They broke up in 2017, and I've been pursuing, at least Greg Puciato, their frontman, has been pursuing a lot of things outside of that. But today, I'm going to be breaking down their 6 albums, ranking them, giving you a roadmap to their discography if you've never listened to them before, which I would understand why not, because on the surface, they seem like a really hard band to get into because of how spastic their sounds are, how intense they can get, and how just outright visceral they come across. But I'm going to do my best to give you guys a roadmap, and give you guys sort of the best jumping on points, and so on and so forth. But before I do that, they have 4 EPs to talk about that are actually all kind of poignant into their career that I'm going to be breaking down right now.
Knew Dillinger when you saw him smile.
Now, before they dropped their debut album, they actually dropped a couple of EPs, one of them being Selftitled, and it dropped in 1997, and honestly, I think that this is the least interesting slice of their discography. I feel like it's a great thing for fans to find and dive into, because I do feel like Dimitri Minakaki's vocals, who was their initial vocalist, has the same emotional intensity and ferocity seen on Calculating Infinity, but a lot of the accompanying musicianship just doesn't feel as reined in or as tight as it does on Calculating Infinity. And nor does it sound as foreboding at points. You know, it's a lot more straight-laced. You know, there is still some nice punchy bass playing, like on I Love Secret Agents. The main riffs on here as a whole are pretty nice. You know, Chris Penny's drums across the board are still really cool. But I feel like, as a whole, this is a lot less interesting than a lot of their discography. I still think it's worth it for fans to listen to if you've never listened to this before, or if you've only listened to the Puciato stuff, and you want something a little more different, if you want to see them sort of in their humble beginnings, I would listen to their Self-Titled EP. Again, nothing mind-blowing, but it's still solid in its own regard. Just compared to the rest of the discography, it's not nearly as good. Now, they followed that EP up with another EP called Under the Running Board in 1998, and this is a much cooler release, seeing some real sinister sounds more injected into this, and the production on here feels a lot more fleshed out. I think there's a reason why this is still on streaming platforms and their debut EP isn't on there. You know, whether it's the Mullet Burden's intro or the more spastic edge seen on Sandbox Magician. There's a lot of sounds on here that you can see them expanding more into what would be their debut just the following year. It's an incredible EP. You know, as a whole, I just think it's a better setup to their debut album. I feel like if you like Calculating Infinity, you want something a little more of that, listen to this album. It's good. I could see these tracks all fitting on Calculating Infinity easily. After Calculating Infinity, their initial vocalist, Dimitri Minakakis, left the band. And they were vocalistless for a few years, but they enlisted the help of Mike Patton, who came in on Irony is a Dead Scene, which was my introduction to this band, because y'all know I love Mike Patton, and I saw he did this EP with this band called the Dillinger Escape Plan one day when I was scouring the internet, and I checked it out. And I think it's the most influential aspect of their career. I feel like every single record after this EP had some influence with their time with Mike Patton. Even though he doesn't front the band anymore after this, you can see that his sort of touch he left with the band left a rippling effect. I think it's a great EP. I think Mike Patton works really well with these guys, and I feel like it's an essential piece of their discography. Whether it's the outright sporadicness of the first 3 tracks, or the weirdness that is their Aphex Twin Come to Daddy cover. It has the same production boost that they would explore more on Miss Machine, which was the follow-up to this. And I think that it's an incredibly, not only important slice of their discography, but an incredibly good starting point for the band. Honestly, if you don't want to listen to an album, and you want just a good point in their discography to start with, Irony is a Dead Scene is maybe the best point to start, because it has a vocalist that you may be able to latch onto if you're a fan of Mike Patton's work, with the same musicianship that they would have throughout their entire career. It's a cool-ass EP, one of my favorites, and I think it's really nice. I think it's really, really nice. I like this EP a lot. And between their album Miss Machine and their albums Ironworks, they dropped a little EP in 2006 called Plagiarism, which has a radio cut of one of the songs from Miss Machine, Unretrified, with 4 covers and a live cut. The 4 covers being the more discussed part of this EP, because they're all over the fucking map. They have a 9 Inch Nails cover, which makes sense because, you know, they toured with 9 Inch Nails, you know, they kind of have some inspiration from their sound, especially if you listen to Miss Machine. A Massive Attack cover, which again, they're Dillinger, they're weird, maybe makes sense. A Soundgarden cover of Jesus Christ Pose, which is bizarrely amazing. Like, I know that they're known for sometimes their covers. They had a video that went in circulation of their Hot for Teacher cover, which was incredible. And a Justin Timberlake cover of Like I Love You, which is the weirdest of the 4, for sure, and also seemingly teases what Ironworks is going to go for sonically, because Ironworks has some incredibly non-mathcore-y or even metal catchy moments, but it's a weird cover. It's straight-laced, played straight, and it's cool, because I like Justin Timberlake, and I love this band, and I think Greg pulls off the vocals well. It's just weird to see them cover this song. This is the biggest oddity of their discography, IMO. None of the covers are terrible, they're just weird. The Wish one's probably the most normal, and again, it's still played straight. Definitely a point of curiosity if you like the band and you want to hear them cover other bands. This would be the place to go. I wouldn't say it's my favorite thing they've ever done by a long shot. And again, it's not on streaming services, and I'm sure that's for a reason. But again, it's a point of curiosity, I guess. Now, let's get into their albums proper. Now, one thing I said in my Bands of All Time video that may have seem a little harsh at first is that I kind of wrote off Ironworks as objectively their worst record. And that's not to say it's bad. It's really not. This album is still fantastic, and I can see why it has its fans. And I would honestly argue it's one of the better entry points into their discography. I personally just think it feels like a transition. You know, because while Miss Machine had hooks and had some moments that were a little more accessible, it was still really off the walls. And this sort of acted like a bridge between Miss Machine and Option Paralysis, which I would argue are 2 much stronger records. This feels like something that's a little more transitional. While it still has its spastic as fuck moments, like Fix Your Face, or Sick on Sunday, or the When Acting As interludes, which seem a little more glitchy and electronic inspired than some of the stuff that was on Miss Machine, to a much more upfront sort of point. You know, them covering Aphex Twin seems to make a little more sense following these songs. They just sort of balance that with catchier moments like the more straight played Milk Lizard, which has, again, some tight riffage, a nice main riff, and some good vocal work. It also has Black Bubblegum, which is, again, that Like I Love You that Like I Love You cover makes a lot of sense with a song like this being on Ironworks. I love this song. Don't get me wrong. I love the hook. I love the poppier sound of that song. It just kind of sticks out a little bit. I think that this album is interesting because while people sort of in the general review populace wrote off Miss Machine for feeling a little directionless, this feels of a similar ilk. It just happens to rein things in a little more song structure and writing wise than Miss Machine. They kind of tone it down a little bit than Miss Machine while not losing necessarily a lot of the experimental edges. Not to say that Miss Machine didn't have its hooks or anything, but it feels a lot more straightforward or, you know, cut and dry. And that's why I feel like it's a good entry point. It has the spasticness that they are known for, but it's not as breakneckly, you know, intense, nor is it as gargantuan as some of the stuff that they would write later on would be. It's just kind of a point where a lot of their stuff kind of coerces into this project that I feel like is a little undercooked as a result. I still think it's good. I still think it's solid. And I feel like it, again, is the best jumping on point if you aren't into intense, mathy stuff. If you're an outsider wanting to get into the Dillinger Escape Plan, you might want to start here if you don't necessarily love everything about what this band sounds like. This might be the best starting point, but it's solid. It's just my least favorite record of theirs.
Couldn't get it right. Come say.
And honestly, again, you may think, what the fuck is wrong with you? Miss Machine's amazing. You're goddamn right it is. It was Greg Puciato's introduction to the band, and he kicks the fucking door down with the 1-2 punch of Panasonic Youth and Sunshine the Werewolf. Two incredible songs that showcase the band's talents. The insane spastic guitar playing on here is intense, and that Mike Patton influence that came in from Irony is a Dead Scene is felt throughout this release. Greg's vocal delivery on moments of Phone Home, Van Damsel, and Setting Fire to Sleeping Giants feels very in line with Mike Patton in a big way. I just feel like they've made better records post this. It's incredible. Don't get me wrong. And obviously it's not even their first record. But while it sort of introduced the world to Puciato's vocal stylings, he would do a better job at gelling with the band and injecting that Patton influence in a different way across his tenure with the band. It's still a fucking insanely intense record that has its moments of catchiness, like Setting Fire to Sleeping Giants, or injecting a dose of melody, like on Highway Robbery, in the same kind of spastic Dillinger way. I just feel like he's gelled with the band better in releases post this. It's a good record. If you're a fan of Mike Patton and you liked Irony as a Dead Scene, I would dive right into Miss Machine, honestly, because it's a good follow-up to that EP that shows the band grew and drew influence from his tenure with the band in a positive way. I feel like it's a good next place to go if you like Irony is a Dead Scene, or you may have checked out some of their 2010s work and you want to see some of those concepts toyed in a more heavy-handed way. Now, I had a hard time with these next two spots as to if I really want to put one over the other in the ranking, because I love the sort of overall lyrical concept of this project, and I feel like it's the most conceptual one in their entire discography outside of maybe one other instance. Ultimately, this sits below the next entry because the next entry is an important point both to me and I feel like for the band at large. But One of Us is the Killer sees the band and ultimately its singer Greg Puciato dealing with addiction in its own sort of way, whether it's up front like in the title track, which has this beautiful refrain, one of us will die but the killer won't survive, or something of that accord, or the imagery and the intensity painted on the opener Prancer's closing moments, or the same sort of stabs with guitar punchiness that you would see on When I Lost My Bet or Paranoia Shields crank up to 11 because that production makes those guitars crunch that much heavier. it's incredible. This album sees them sort of reining in some of the offshoots that the record before this kind of saw, and while some would say that's a step up, there are other reasons why I put Option Paralysis above One of Us is the Killer, but this is an incredible follow-up that sees them, again, keeping that patent influence sort of a thread, especially on tracks like Paranoia Shields or Understanding Decay, which has an incredible bass line, Paranoia Shields does, and having those sort of industrial tendencies that they sort of started with on Miss Machine sort of done in a much more cohesive way, kind of following through what they also did on Ironworks, on CH375, 268, 277 ARS. You know, there's a lot of sounds on here that still feel like Pusciato era Dillinger. They're just the most tight on One of Us is the Killer. And if you like metal and you want to get into Dillinger's Escape Plan, I feel like One of Us is the Killer is the gateway record for it, because it has the intensity, it has the spastic playing you would come to know them for if you delved into other parts of the discography, but it's all tied together in a nice bow, while having some of the same jazzier offshoots that they would toy with, both, again, before and after this point in their career. It's an incredible record that has a lot of pain in its lyrics, a lot of talking down to the seeming protagonist of the record in its own way. But I love it. I love the hooks on this thing. Greg fucking soars on a lot of this. You know, whether it's the melodies on Hero of the Soviet Union or the title track, as I already alluded before. It's an incredible fucking record that has the same level of intensity you would love of this band if you gave them a chance. But again, just a lot tighter, and I feel like that's why it may be one of the better starting points of the discography, to start here and kind of work your way around as you see fit. It's incredible. And it was my album of the year that it came out, I think. It's such a good project, man. It's fucking killer. Now, like I said, after Irony is a Dead Scene, I immediately dove into the discography, and I started with their debut, Calculating Infinity, which came out. It's amazing to me that this album came out in 1999, because it doesn't sound like it came out in 1999. It sounds so bizarrely fucking futuristic from its dizzying guitar playing, like on the opener, Sugar Coated Sour, which has this explosive opening that is still one of my favorites in the genre, or on tracks like Jim Fear or Clip the Apex or Fourth Grade Dropout, with the outright staunching burn fucking sludgy ass track like 43% Burn, or its offshoots into weird, ambitious, ambiguous sound, you know, less vocal driven tracks like Asterisk, Pound Sign, Ellipses, or the title track, which sees again a little more Patton-esque playing and weird bungle-esque offshoots that I enjoy, and show that even before Greg joined the band or Mike Patton joined the band, they had interest in those sounds. It only just took an artist like Mike Patton joining the band for them to really double down on those aesthetics. You know, it's an incredible debut and shows them at their most raw, their most fierce. Dimitri's vocals are so very different than Greg, but in such a great way. I love how raw and visceral he gets. The breakdown on Sugar Coated Sour is incredible. The point where his vocals come in at 43% burnt. Insane. He fits the dizzying drums that are throughout this thing and the guitars so very well, because he's just so emotionally raw. His anger is felt. And I love this project so very, very much. I feel like this is a decent, if not starting point, next point of interest for those that enjoyed One of Us is the Killer, but want to see them in their more raw genesis. Or if you like bands like Converge, you'll probably like this more and see it more as a gateway record into their discography, because Dimitri's vocals, unlike Greg's, keep this rawness throughout that feels so much more in line with the scene than Greg does. I love Greg's vocals. He's my favorite vocalist the band has had, Mike Patton included, just because I feel like Mike Patton stands out so much on Irony is a Dead Scene, and Greg melds really well with the band. But Dimitri's vocals showcase their roots in a very real way, and I love this project for it. I think that it is the most, again, unnerving and dizzying and just breakneck the band gets, but in a very real way, and I love it for that. I feel like, again, it's a lot of their discography feels essential because the tunes are just so consistent across the board. I love this record. I love it so very much. I think it hooked me upon first listen because it was unlike anything I had heard in heavy metal music, and continued to give me more love for a genre that I felt like I had burnt out on because I grew up with it. I grew up with metal. You know, that's why I started talking about it on the channel, because it was a genre that I grew up with. I grew up with hair metal and thrash and groove metal as a kid, with bands like Pantera and Anthrax and Metallica being seminal parts of my childhood. And as I got older, I got into more bands. And when I was in high school, while I still loved the genre, I felt like I had explored all that the genre had to offer outside of its more extreme ventures. And this was one of my gateways into it. This is one of my gateways into extreme metal, and I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for the musicianship on here, and I love the energy that's on here. It's the most insane the band gets on record, in my opinion, and I think that's why. Because that's why it hooked me. Because it was just fucking nuts. And even though I've listened to this thing to death, the minute I throw it on, I get goosebumps because of just how talented these guys are. It's an incredible fucking record, and yeah, it may not be my favorite, but I think it's one of the most important albums in the band's career because of how insane it is. Now, their last album is next in line because, just like Calculating Infinity, this gave me this just insanely great feeling from first listen to now. It's even just talking about it, I'm getting goosebumps. This record does something similar to what One of Us is the Killer does, and that it has this overall sense of thematics in its writing, but the writing feels in line with a lot of what the band was going through at the time. While One of Us is the Killer kind of saw Greg Puciato purging his own addiction and his dealings with it, this record as a whole feels like the band confronting their own turmoil and their own end. You know, from the opening track, Limerick Death's sort of refrain of "I gave you everything you wanted, you were everything to me," it cements this feeling of dread throughout the entire release that sees the band doing whatever the fuck they want, and I'm happy for it. Whether it's fugues, IDM-inspired shit, to a track like Nothing to Forget's almost glam rock-inspired drumline, to the last track, the title track's use of strings and bare minimalism before the band kind of flourishes out with a refrain that is just as earwormy as Limerick Death's of Finding the Way to Die Alone. You know, this is the band giving their fans the send-off they know they deserve for being such fans of the band's work. And I tell ya, while I miss this band, I'm glad they went out with a record like Dissociation that has some incredibly strong writing, the same quality musicianship that the band has continued to showcase throughout their entire career, while injecting a lot of experimental moments as well that saw the band continuing to push the envelope to their very last, second. I adore this project for what it brings. I love that the spasticness that they're known for is there. I love tracks like Symptom of Terminal Illness or Low Fields Boulevard's way of branching their sounds out as well. I love the production on here, and I love this record. It's so very near and dear to me. I think that it's an incredible release that is how you end a career, in my opinion. I feel like it's a good point to go to if you got into Ironworks, or if you like One of Us is the Killer and you want to hear them do something just as lyrically conceptual. Listen to Dissociation. It may be their last record, but it's damn sure not their worst. Now, if the bell curve on Rate Your Music for this band is to be factored in, this is probably a hot take to some people, but hear me out. I feel like this record does what they had been trying to do with their first few albums with Greg. They were trying to experiment with their sounds while retaining that spastic edge that coded those records, and I feel like on Option Paralysis they achieved that perfectly. You know, while it's not as maybe instrumentally concise as a record like One of Us is the Killer or their debut, and it has some moments that outright don't really have that spastic edge, like the 6-minute Widower, they still keep the listener engaged across the entire runtime. You know, they still have that mathy insanity on the incredible opener, Farewell Mona Lisa, or tracks like Crystal Morning, or Room Full of Eyes. They combine that with better accompaniment, like Gold Teeth on a Bum, which has this introduction that bleeds into a more metalcore-centric track, or the closer, Parasitic Twins, which does something of a similar ilk, while also, again, retaining those catchier, hook-centric songs that were seen on tracks like Milk Lizard and Setting Fire to Sleeping Giants, with tracks like Endless Endings, or, again, Room Full of Eyes, or, again, Widower, which is this incredible, sad-filled, almost ballad-esque moment that has this incredible drum work on it, paired with this piano and almost ambient backdrop for Greg to just belt his ass off. I love a lot of what this project has to offer, and I feel like it's a good accompanied record. If you enjoy Ironworks, if you listen to Ironworks and you want something a little more concise, I would listen to Option Paralysis. I feel like it's a good companion record to it and Mish Machine. I feel like if you listen to Ironworks and you maybe went through Mish Machine next and you want something a little more concise than those two records, Option Paralysis is the way to go. If you enjoy the insanity and musicianship on tracks like Calculating Infinity or Dissociation, and you want something not as maybe lyrically conceptual as Dissociation or One of Us the Killer, give Option Paralysis a spin. I know it's the lowest rated record on Rate Your Music for this band, but I feel like it's their best, if only because it's the most uniformly tight as far as the melding of ideas go. Again, it's not as insane as their beginnings, it's not as experimental as their send-off or as lyrically tight, and it may just be because it's the record that they dropped after I got into them, but it's just a record that I continue to revisit and continue to love a lot of what they're doing on here. You know, I feel like their talents across the board are showcased still so very well, and I feel like that's why it's my favorite. You know, I think it could be because I got into them between Ironworks and this just happened to come out after I had listened to their early work so much, but it still continues to floor me with how insanely tight this project is, and that's why it's my favorite Dillinger Escape Plan record. But that's my thoughts on their discography. What did you think of it? I had a lot of fun doing this review, because I really love this band, and I've never really talked about them in depth on the channel, but I'm happy to. I'm happy that I made this video, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it gave outsiders a sort of stepping stone, because I feel like they are one of the more important bands in metal music, especially after getting into them at a certain point and seeing where their career took them. I think that they are one of the more interesting bands as a result as well, and they have a lot of cool ideas and images in their lyrics that I feel like are what set them apart from other bands of their ilk, and that's why they're one of my favorites. Also, they're just a bunch of talented dudes. You know, I love this band a lot. I love the Dillinger Escape Plan so very much. Again, the vocals across the board I really enjoy, and I've talked about that a lot, but I haven't really given a whole lot of love to Ben Weinman's guitars, who was one of the core sounds of the band. His guitar playing is insane. You know, he is a true virtuoso and a true talent in his scene, and I feel like they are one of the most captivating bands in their scene, for sure. But I'm going to get out of here. If you like this review, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. I drop 6 to 7 vids a week, usually around these 3 topics. And if you like this video, you'll probably like the other stuff I do. Special thanks to my patrons. If you would like to join their ranks to get early access to content like this review, which actually dropped on Tuesday, exclusive content, or you want to help drive the community, because this was also decided on the Patreon, this 1-by-1 vote, and that's why I decided to do a discography review on it. It's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.